What is up, Flick fans, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to a very special video. You guys have been asking for it, so today I will be doing the most lopsided tier list you will ever see. This is the Pixar tier list. Now, I am filming this before I get the chance to see Toy Story 4, and you might be asking yourself, Austin, you haven't seen Toy Story 4. How are you going to place it on this list? Well, that will be the only movie that I will not be placing on a tier in this specific video, but tune in to my Toy Story 4 official review on Thursday evening, and I will be placing it on a tier at the end of that video, so check that out if you want to see where that movie ranks. But prior to Toy Story 4, there have been so many Pixar outings that I have not had a chance to dive in deep on this channel, and even though there's going to be a lot of movies talked about on this list, I'm going to try my best to hit on each one accordingly and talk about some movies that hold a very special place in my heart. If you guys are watching this hoping that I will bash on some of these Pixar movies, you're not going to find a lot of that in this video. This is all about talking about how much I love the Pixar films, and like I said, a completely lopsided list because there's going to be a lot of greats and a lot of awesomes and not very many things on the bottom of this tier list, but that's what we're going to do today. Alright, let's get into it and start with the very first movie on this list, and I actually reshuffled all of the films, put them in order of the franchises and when they released, and we start, because Toy Story 4 is releasing this week, we start with Toy Story 1, and by the way, I need you guys in the comments down below. Let me know, what do you think about all of these movies? Which movies would you place on the awesome tier? And do you have Pixar films that would go on that awful, bad, and even the meh tier? Because for a lot of people, you're not going to find too many of those, but I'm always interested to see and hear when people do not like a Pixar film that maybe everyone else likes. But I love that. That's what movies are all about, being different. Okay, Austin, shut up. Start talking about the films. We start with Toy Story 1, and it's very suiting that we start with this because this is the movie that, out of all of these films, even one that I would actually place above Toy Story 1 on the movies that I love the most, is the one that I have watched the most. Toy Story 1 released the year I was born, and my mother purchased it on VHS, and I literally remember watching this as a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. Now, Toy Story 2, and we'll get into that here in just a second, but that was actually the first movie that I saw in theaters. The first movie ever, but Toy Story 1, too young, fresh out of the womb at that point, didn't get a chance to watch it then. But after watching it 30 plus times in my life, probably 40 at this point, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that this film holds up, because I just went back and watched it last week. The jokes, everything about it, the adult nature, the way that the characters interact, the fact that Woody, he's not the nicest guy, he's a bit of a douchebag, but he comes into his own by the end of this movie, and by the time you get to Toy Story 4, where we are at now, he is turned into a completely different character. I don't think Pixar knew what they had with Toy Story 1, right? They had incredible talent. They had beautiful filmmakers. The visual style of this movie still holds up today. No, it's not as detailed and it doesn't look as incredible as the Pixar films look now, but it still looks really good, especially when you think back to 1995 and other movies that were dropping at this time, and then how beautiful Toy Story is, and just the nature of the story and how deep it gets. It's all about toys or characters or human beings in a way. It's the human spirit feeling like you don't belong, feeling like you're being overshadowed by this other person. Woody, he is a jealous character, right? He gets jealous when Buzz comes on the scene. Buzz has to accept himself. He has to realize and understand that he is not a space ranger. He is a toy, as Woody says. And once he realizes that, you can feel the emotional impact within his characters. So all of these things happening to all of these characters on screen, plus the side characters, Ham and Mr. Potato Head and Rex, making the most adult jokes that when I went back and watched it last week, I don't even remember seeing 2 years ago because they were over my head at that point, right? There are so many things hidden within this movie. I would say more than any of the Pixar movies we are getting right now, because although there are adult jokes in Toy Story 3, nowhere near the level of Toy Story 1, right? I still love that film, but Toy Story 1 is the OG. There is a reason it's the OG, and because of all of those things, I could talk about this movie all day, and I probably will again, because I'm thinking about just doing a Toy Story, all 4 movies ranked video where I'm just focusing on those films, so I'm not going to talk about them too much in this video. I'm going to put Toy Story, the original one, starting out really strong here on the awesome tier because I truly believe this movie is awesome. Now, when I put movies on the awesome tier, there are going to be so many of these films that you're like, Austin, why'd you put it on the great tier? Why didn't you put it on the awesome tier? I'm saving the awesome tier for like the 4 or 5 best of the best, ones I would get really close to a 10 out of 10 on. The great ones, think more 8 or 9 out of 10 in that range, but it doesn't mean I don't love them because I truly love all of the movies I place on those 2 tiers. Okay, next up, Toy Story 2. And I'm going to get this one out of the way super quick. I'm going to place it on the great tier. Now, not placing it on the awesome tier does not mean that I don't believe it levels up or measures up to the level of quality of the first one. And like I said, this is my first movie ever in the theater, right? This is one of the best theatrical experiences I've ever had because I just remember all of it, the nostalgia, everything this movie had going for it, on top of the fact that, oh my gosh, we're seeing these characters again. We're being introduced to new characters in Jessie and Bullseye and the Prospector and the voice cast, both returning and brand new talent. It's all incredible. And then back to the themes, right? You have so many incredible themes in this movie that are completely different than the first film. You have Woody, who feels like he doesn't belong in this situation anymore because of what happened to him. He feels broken. He feels like one more break and he's gone. That's what the Prospector tells him, right? You have this one character going through this emotional conflict, and then you have Buzz doing what Woody did for him in the first movie, saving his life. Now he has to go back for him, and Woody starts to realize, okay, maybe I've not found my place with Andy. Maybe this is my home right here, and my goal, my job, is to save these other toys. All of these things happening, and some incredible banter and dialogue between the side characters. A lot of Star Wars references in this movie. At the beginning, you've got the sound effect. At the end, you've got Zurg, I am your father, that scene between he and Buzz. So many great things to talk about in this movie. The only reason I don't place it on the awesome tier is because I feel like there's maybe a bit too much going on compared to the first, whereas the first was very simple. In the second movie, there's a lot going on. Once again, it doesn't take it down too much because I still feel like it's a great movie. I would just place it on a tier below the first, even though they're both part of one of the greatest trilogies of all time. One of the reasons why they're a part of one of the greatest trilogies of all time is because of Toy Story 3, and this movie is, yeah, you know what? It is great, but I think it's awesome, right? Toy Story 3 is so close to the first movie in my opinion. Now, if you guys want to see my full rankings with scores included, you can click on the link in the description on my Letterboxd page, and that will give you the actual order where I have these movies. But I will go ahead and spoil the fact that I do have Toy Story 1 slightly above Toy Story 3, and the only reason I do is because Toy Story 1, it's the OG, right? But Toy Story 3 has a lot of things going for it. Going for it as in you did not expect this movie to measure up to the first two, but it does. It brings in an incredible villain in Lotso. Michael Keaton as Ken, I contend to this day, is one of the standout voice performances of Pixar's history. He is so good. His relationship with Barbie is incredible. But these toys work so well in this movie because they are forgotten. Andy is growing up. All they want to do is to be played with, and once they get to the place to where that's going to happen, right, they've made it. They've made it to heaven. They're going to prosper. Well, not necessarily. Lotso, he's a bad bear, man. He's got a lot of bad things up his sleeve, and you figure that out, and I can't stop thinking about rewatching this last week. I can't stop thinking about how terrified I was the first time I watched this when the characters are slowly sinking towards their deaths. I mean, that final act in general of Toy Story 3 is one of the most impactful and emotional third acts I've ever seen, because you go from being extremely scared for our characters to relieved to crying at the end when Andy gives the toys to Bonnie and they're both playing in the yard, which, you know, it's a tad bit creepy of a scene, but you accept it because it's the perfect ending to Andy's story, right? That entire scene, that entire moment with Andy's character, it's a little weird. He's playing with toys at that age. I probably would too, but I love everything about it. It worked so well, and Toy Story 3 was the perfect ending to the Toy Story franchise, right? Until we get the new one this week. Okay, next up is Monsters, Inc. And Monsters, Inc., in my opinion, is another one of the OGs. Now, I'm going to put Monsters, Inc. on the great tier, pushing the awesome tier. It is very close to the awesome tier, in my opinion. The only reason I'm not putting it there is because, like I said, I'm saving that for the best of the best, but let's say there are going to be 4 movies on that awesome tier. Bit of a spoiler alert for the rest of this video. I would have to put Monsters, Inc. right behind those 4. At number 5, I love Monsters, Inc. more than most people because this is another one that I grew up with. It came out right at the prime age. I watched it as a kid and I love it. And I can say that about a lot of really bad movies, right? I watched Mike Myers' The Cat in the Hat as a kid and I really enjoyed that. And now I look back on it and it's really creepy, weird, and not very good of a movie. But Monsters, Inc. is one of those films that I watched as a kid, I watched as a preteen, I watched as a teen, and I watch it now. And it doesn't just hold up, it gets better because you start to realize what certain things mean and you start to dig into the emotion of the characters. And that final scene where Boo walks in and just the emotion behind that one word, kitty, and that smile on Sully's face is just one of the best and most emotional scenes I've ever seen in an animated movie. Everything from the visuals of the doors moving and the monsters going to different situations to the snow cones, everything about this movie is so memorable. The lines and the fact that we're getting a brand new series on Disney Plus is one of the most exciting things for me because you're bringing back that nostalgia, but this story is primed for a sequel. We got a prequel, but in my opinion, it was primed for a sequel, and I loved absolutely everything about it. Now, like I said, we did get a prequel to Monsters Incorporated, and that is Monsters University. Now, I have only seen Monsters University one time. And when I saw it, it was not in the theaters. It was actually at home because I missed it in the theaters. I did not love this movie near as much as the first or near as much as I wanted to, right? The story for me wasn't as engaging as I wanted it to be. And the fact that it was in college was exciting because you can play on all of the college tropes with these monsters, with the characters that we knew from the first movie. I did like seeing the origins, but I just think the story wasn't as well-rounded or funny or exciting as I wanted it to be. Now, I have heard from some people lately saying Monsters University is underrated. It's better than people think it is. And I will admit, when I first saw it, I wasn't as focused as I should have been. I maybe was doing other things around the house. I was watching it on DVD. I believe we rented it at the time, but I need to go back and I need to see this movie again. From what I can remember from the plot, I did not think it was incredible, and because of all of those things and because of the way I feel about this movie, I'm going to place it on the okay tier, and this may be the first thing on this list that causes some controversy because I know people in my life that like this movie a lot more than I do. It's just not as fond in my memories because it was a bit of a disappointment compared to the first one, and I didn't like the animation style near as much. Okay, before we hit on too much controversy, let's move on to another one of my favorite animated movies as a child, and this is Finding Nemo. This is the definition of emotion in a Pixar movie. This is a father who loses his son, right? He's lost everything else in his life. He's lost his lady. He's lost all of his other children. And the only injured child that he has left is Nemo. And their chemistry is off the charts in this film. I think Albert Brooks gives one of the best voice performances I've ever heard in a movie. And yes, we get a sequel, we get to learn more about them in the next movie, but where I fell in love with Marlin and Nemo and just all of these characters, even Dory. Dory is one of the best supporting characters I have ever seen in my life. I love Finding Nemo. It is visually stunning. It is one of the best looking underwater movies I have ever seen. Well, I guess we've not seen a lot of underwater movies, but if you're comparing to this like Shark Tale, yeah, Finding Nemo's better. Listen, guys. This is one of those. It is a Pixar classic for a reason. I feel like you can say that about a lot of Pixar films, but the characters are just so likable. You have Bruce the shark coming in, you have the jellyfish scene, you have the turtle, the whale. I mean, you can list just memorable scene after memorable scene and memorable quote after memorable quote, and there are so many things about this film that just blow me away every time I go back and watch it. And it seems like every time I rewatch this film, I get something new out of it, and I've seen it so many times. And because of all of those things, I have to place Finding Nemo on the awesome tier because I truly believe it's just an awesome movie. It is a movie that I want to go back and revisit on a yearly basis every year until I die. And I can say the same thing for a lot of Pixar films, even Pixar films I don't have on the awesome tier. But you know what? That's Pixar. Next up is Finding Dory. Now, Finding Dory was a sequel that I was very excited for, but I didn't want this to have the Minions effect, right? The Minions movie takes great side characters and then places them at the forefront. But because they're at the forefront, they're significantly more annoying than they are in the movie where they're the perfect side characters. Right, Dory is an incredible side character, but when she was at the forefront of this film, I was afraid it would be too much. I was afraid she would get overly annoying. That wasn't the case. My issue with Finding Dory is that the story wasn't as engaging as Finding Nemo, and the story did not peel back the layers like the first film. It wasn't as emotionally resonant for me, right? It was a really fun kids movie, and there's some great scenes and some great characters and so many awesome moments, but that's just it. It's moments. It's not a movie that at the end of the day I'm going to be sitting and thinking about for hours at a time. What does this mean? What did this character mean when they said this? And there weren't as many adult moments in this film as there were in the original, and because of that, I still enjoyed Finding Dory. Like I said, I had fun, and there are awesome characters, and Dory is not the problem in this movie. The big problem for me was the story. It just wasn't Pixar level for me, but it was still good enough to where I can actually put this on the good tier. I just can't get it any higher than that. I can't put it on the great tier. I can't put it on the awesome tier for sure, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it. Let me just spoil The Incredibles. The Incredibles is one of my favorite movies of all time. So is Toy Story, and so is Toy Story 3, and I guess so is Finding Nemo. But Incredibles is my number one Pixar film, right? You can see that if you look at my Letterboxd list. I've done a Pixar ranking before. This is the standard for me, right? Well, mostly because I'm a superhero fan. I'm clearly a big fan of the comics, big fan of the sci-fi, that aspect. The Incredibles mixes all of those things, brings it into the Pixar world and has that Pixar magic, but it also has this spy espionage element. It's like a James Bond movie with superheroes made by Pixar. That's perfect. That is perfection. All you have to do is execute, and they executed, right? No duh. It's in the awesome tier for me, but this movie, I can't find anything that I have an issue with. Nothing. I have no issue with really any of the movies on this awesome tier. I don't really have an issue with anything about them. I think they are as close to perfect as any animated film will ever get, and those are the four for me. Those are the gold standard. They've just done it better than anyone else, and The Incredibles has one of the best casts I've ever seen, one of the best scores for a superhero movie, not just a Pixar movie, a superhero movie. I can play the theme in my head right now and just sit here. And the villain in Syndrome is awesome. The voice is incredible, but you have a villain who gets ruined as a kid and he grows up to be a villain. Okay, yes, it was predictable, but it wasn't the fact that we could predict that he was going to be the villain. It's what he did as a villain, messing with them emotionally, messing with them mentally, and then bringing in the physical elements with the robots and the minions and the bad guys. Guys, this movie is just one of the best superhero movies I've ever seen in my lifetime, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Now, Incredibles 2 had a lot to live up to, and I see it, and at first I was just thinking, well, Into the Spider-Verse came out, and that movie is, for me, superior anyway, so it made people look back at Incredibles 2 and say, well, it's not as good as we thought it was, right? But I've seen even worse backlash than that. I've seen people say this movie is bad. I've seen people say this movie is nowhere close to the original, but when it first came out, like that first month, everyone was raving about it, and then everyone was talking about it, and then inevitably, like with Logan and like with other superhero movies that start out great, and then people start to turn on it. I've even been seeing that with Endgame this year. People are like, it's overrated. I got that a lot. I got that vibe online last year with Incredibles 2, and if you don't like the movie, that's fine. I loved it when I first saw it. I did. I loved it. I don't think it's as good as the original, but I thoroughly enjoyed what they did. I liked how they swapped genders, basically. Mr. Incredible is now dealing with what Elastigirl has to deal with, and Elastigirl is now going out and doing these things. I don't think it was a social justice warrior thing. I think it was just really smart writing. It was perfect for the characters. It worked, and it is the most relatable situation. Him staying at home with his kids, trying to figure all that out. Listen, I plan on having kids in the very near future. What it means to be a stay-at-home dad, I feel like I could relate heavily to what he went through in that film. And then everything with Jack. And yes, the villain was predictable here. The villain was also predictable in the first Incredibles movie. As a kid, I didn't care. I think kids seeing Incredibles 2, I don't think they care that the villain is predictable. Yes, the third act here is not as good as the third act of the first, and I do think there are elements missing in this movie, but I still really enjoyed it, and I loved it at the time, and I've seen it like 3 or 4 times, and I still love the movie. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys and say I don't love the movie because other people don't love it. No, I love it, and I'm going to put it on the great tier. I think it belongs up there with the other Pixar movies that I'm putting on that level. Okay, next up is Cars. And the first Cars is an interesting one for me because I enjoyed this when I first saw it in the theaters. And the more I watched it and the more I thought about this story compared to the other stories that Pixar has given us, the less I look up to it, right, as one of the top tier Pixar movies. I never thought it was that good, right, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it when I first saw it. But Cars is just a film that's missing something, right? You have really good characters. You have Owen Wilson, wow, as our lead, and Larry the Cable Guy, who is a bit annoying in the second Cars, but in the first Cars, he's charming. He's nice, right? But you have more of a simplistic story. It's more of a film for kids. They left out some adult elements that they put in these other Pixar movies, right? There are just things missing here that keep this from reaching its full potential. And while I think it is a good movie, I can't quite get it anywhere higher than that. So I am going to place it on the good tier because once again, I think Cars is pretty solid, right? It's a great animated movie if you're not holding it up to Pixar standards. If you're holding it up to Pixar standards, yeah, it could have done better. You could have fleshed out the characters a bit more, maybe given it a deeper level. And I know Lightning McQueen coming on the scene, he's going through a tough time in his life. He has to get back out there and finish the race and be the hero. Yeah, that's fine. We've just seen things like this before, but we've never seen it in car form, so that was pretty cool. And this movie was one that sold a lot of merchandise when it first came out, so of course they're getting a sequel, and the sequel is Cars 2. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this video that I would not be putting a lot of movies on the lower half of this tier list, right? But unfortunately, for Cars 2, I will be putting Cars 2 in the bad tier because I believe Cars 2 is the only bad Pixar movie. That's right, I'm spoiling it. No more awfuls for me, no more bads for me. I think every other movie on this list will be somewhere at the top of this list, but Cars 2 is the worst Pixar movie. It's the first time I had watched a Pixar film and just felt nothing. And the big reason for that is because they put Tow Mater at the forefront. And what did I say earlier? When you put an annoying, potentially annoying side character at the forefront, it's always a 50-50 thing whether it's going to work or not. Minions did not work. Dory worked. Just the movie wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. Mater did not work. Mater was annoying. He was too much. I only like him in small doses. I like him in Cars 1. I love him in Cars 3 because he's barely in Cars 3. But in Cars 2, it just didn't work. It wasn't fun. And they took away the magic. They just made a spy movie, right? And not a fun, inventive spy movie like The Incredibles. They just turned Mater into a spy, and I remember nothing about this film. It's the only Pixar movie I can look at and say, I remember nothing. Even Cars 3, which we'll get into, let's go ahead and get into it. I enjoy elements of that movie. I think Cars 3 is better than people give it credit for. It did not do anything different. It didn't do anything new, right? But it did do enough to make me sit back and go, yeah, I enjoyed that. I thought it was okay. Let's go ahead and place it on the okay tier because that's where I'm going with this, right? I think Cars 3 is okay. Maybe I was being less harsh than I should have been just because I was so impressed with it, comparing it to Cars 2 because Cars 2 was so bad. But Cars 3 was a bit better. It gave us more interesting characters. It gave us a really good voice cast. Nathan Fillion was awesome, returning side characters, and Lightning dealing with the fact that he's being overshadowed by this other car, dealing with the fact that he's not the way that he used to be. The trailer alone made me really excited for Cars 3. And at the end of the day, I walked out saying, yeah, it's okay. I mean, nothing more. It's almost to the meh level because, you know, it could have felt meh, but I did get enough out of it and I had enough fun with it to where I could say, it's okay. And that's where I'm putting it on this list. But who knows? Maybe if I watch it again, I'm going to put it on the mid tier because I don't remember too much about it. Next up is Ratatouille. Now, Ratatouille is one for me that I feel like is a very underrated Pixar movie because when people talk about the best Pixar films, well, it's hard to talk about all of them because really, when you're talking about the best Pixar films, it's all of these movies, and then like these movies, right? Because there are so many great ones. But I think Ratatouille is truly a great movie. This is from director Brad Bird, the director of the Incredibles films, and you can just feel his touch on this film. It's loving, it's heartwarming. It is one of the best displays of food I've ever seen in a movie. This and Chef by Jon Favreau, right? Those two movies display food so well. But then you have this great story between these two friends, this friendship, this unexpected friendship with this guy that develops this relationship with this rat. I was about to say mouse, but with this rat, right? But the rat, played brilliantly by Patton Oswalt, knows how to cook. This guy, whom is a chef, does not know how to cook. You guys can see where this is going, but the movie is not just that, right? It develops these friendships. It pays off emotionally at the end. The music is beautiful. The atmosphere, the setting, everything about this movie just works so well. And I encourage you, if you haven't seen Ratatouille in a while, go back and give it a revisit because it's one of those forgotten, great Pixar films. And I'm saying that for myself because I need to go back and rewatch it because I loved it so much the first few times I saw it. Next up is The Good Dinosaur. Now, when I said I have not seen all of the Pixar movies until recently, The Good Dinosaur is the one that I had to go back and watch. I was worried it wasn't going to measure up to the other films, and it didn't quite do that, right? Because this, for me, is the forgotten Pixar movie. Didn't get to see it in the theaters, missed it on DVD, missed it on Blu-ray, missed it at all of these opportunities. I finally got to see it because it was on Stars, and I'm like, I gotta watch The Good Dinosaur. And I thought it was okay. I thought the atmosphere and the world building and the setting of this movie, the backgrounds, one of the most visually stunning Pixar films I've ever seen. It's just the story wasn't as compelling as Pixar often puts out, and the story wasn't all there for me. I can see why they had all of the delays and the issues behind the scenes with this movie. They didn't want to release it because they're like, oh, it's not Pixar standards. I don't think it's Pixar standards either, but I still think it was okay. I think it works for what kids needed out of this film. It has a nice lesson in there, nice father-son relationship at the beginning, brother-sister relationship as well. But then you have this adventure with this dinosaur and with this kid, and the whole premise of what would have happened if the meteor never hit the dinosaurs. All of that's interesting, and it sounds great on paper. I don't think the execution was as well as it was established on paper, but I still really enjoyed The Good Dinosaur for what it was and for what my expectations were, and I think it was an okay movie. I really do. Next up is A Bug's Life, and I'm going to go ahead and place A Bug's Life on the good tier because I think A Bug's Life is good, right? It's one of the OGs, technically, because it's one of the first ever Pixar films, and many people love this film. I don't quite love it. I loved it as a kid. It's another one of those movies. I loved it as a kid. I watch it now. I'm like, well, it's not quite as good as the Pixar standard. But it's still really good, especially for one of the first animated movies of its kind and one of the first of this story of its kind, with a really great voice cast, really fun side characters, and just all of the little elements, right? It's a movie about bugs, so when the rain comes, it's scary. When this bird comes and attacks the bugs, it's like a horror film. There are really cool elements to the story. It's not as grand and epic in the emotional themes as these other Pixar films. It didn't have to be at the time, and it does hold up if you compare it to other Pixar movies. It really does. For the time, it holds up well. I just can't quite get it above good, but I still thoroughly enjoy A Bug's Life. Another movie that I thoroughly enjoy, and I just freaking love this film. This is WALL-E. This is, in my opinion, one of those overlooked, not Pixar films, one of those overlooked sci-fi movies, right? The first time I saw WALL-E, I was a bit underwhelmed, a bit disappointed, right? I was a bit younger as well, but going back and rewatching it multiple times and seeing that it's more than just this robot on this deserted planet for half of a movie. It's more than what Pixar pitched it to be. It's more than just this cute little movie about these little bugs that's crawling on a shoulder and this relationship, this story between... There's so much to this film. It is such a beautiful sci-fi exploration of what humanity could be if they head down a certain path. Not saying we're going on that path, because it's a weird path to go on, but it explores that, right? It explores what this robot means to humanity. It explores what this robot feels and the feelings that it begins to develop because it's by itself for so long. It falls in love. It's a beautiful love story. It's a beautiful sci-fi film. WALL-E has a lot going for it, and I truly think it's great. The only reason, once again, I'm not placing it on that awesome tier is because that's just kind of reserved for the movies that I put above everything else, but Pixar just, they make great movie after great movie after great movie, and WALL-E is no different. And another film that is no different is Inside Out. I think Inside Out is a great film. It is so close to that awesome tier. It is so close to me giving it above a 95, which would qualify it for that awesome tier, and I love it. I think Amy Poehler gave one of the best voice performances I have ever seen. All of the emotions were cast perfectly. Everything about this movie worked. The visual style, the emotional connection between, I don't even want to say his name, but that entire scene is just like, come on, man, you're tearing me apart. And that's what this movie does. It explores the inside of a child who is growing up, the inside, what they're feeling, all of the emotions, and you're trying to figure out, how do I belong in this world? What am I doing here? What's my purpose? What's my goal? And all of these things working in your head, trying to figure that out. This was displayed. This is one of the most inventive and creative animated movies I've ever seen. The idea was incredible, and Inside Out is just great. It is just a great Pixar film, and that's why it's on the great tier. And just, we're going to stack them like cakes, baby. We're just going to keep stacking. And we finish it off with a little bit of Coco, because Coco, I'm losing my mind. I've been talking for 30 minutes. Coco is going on the great tier. Coco is a wonderful film that explores culture, the Day of the Dead. I mean, I never could have imagined that Pixar would go down this route and actually deliver on a movie that gave me one of the most incredible... See, Pixar, one thing I've always struggled with Pixar is the trailers and the marketing, they don't get me as excited as I should have been. With movies like Incredibles 2 and even Toy Story 4, the trailers haven't been the best. They're just not well constructed. The trailer for Coco was amazing. And I thought there's no way this movie can measure up to what Coco is offering and hopefully will be providing. But guys, it did. It was wonderful. The voice acting with the kid and Ernesto de la Cruz and everyone was so good. The villainous turn with the characters, the colors, and the visual. This is... Good Dinosaur was great. This is the most visually stunning movie Pixar has ever done. This is the most visually stunning animated movie I have seen this decade. It is that good. It is that amazing to look at. One of my favorite movies of that year. I could say that about every movie on the great tier and the awesome tier. One of my top 10 movies of that respective year, most likely, and I love it. I love everything about it. Coco is actually one of the last movies on the great tier. Now, Brave, and we only have 2 films remaining. Brave is one of those films that people often ask me, Austin, what is one of those movies that was a bit overhyped for you? And the reason why I always say Brave is because Brave actually won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. I believe it won it over Wreck-It Ralph that year. I might be wrong. But I look back at those 2 films, and Wreck-It Ralph is clearly the more memorable movie. It is clearly the better constructed film. And Brave just, it's good for what it is. It's timely. It's a nice period piece, and there are some interesting characters. The accents are great. They're hilarious. And there are some funny moments. I just don't find myself going back to this movie, revisiting it, or just thinking about it all that often. Brave is one of those that displays great ideas with great characters. You have a strong female lead character, and she is very good, and her accent is great. And I love the way that this movie looks. It's just the story wasn't as exciting and engaging. And I think the problem here is that Pixar is doing something that we have seen before, right? Pixar always changes the game, or they take something that's familiar, but they display it in a different way. In this movie, they take this entire concept with the magic and the fact that it's set in this certain time period with these kinds of characters, and I just look at it and I say, oh, yeah, it's Brave. It's not bad. I don't think Brave is a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination, but Brave is not one that I like to revisit. I think it's a bit overrated, and I think it is an okay. All that being said, you just smack-talked Brave, Austin. You're still going to say it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. It worked for the intended audience. I don't think there's anything necessarily bad or meh about it. I don't have a meh Pixar film. I think they're all either okay, good, great, or awesome, except for Cars 2. And where is Up going to go? Well, you guys know it's going up on the great tier. It's going on the great tier. I think Up is a great movie. Now, I don't think Up is as great of a film as some people say, because some people place in the top 3, the top 5 Pixar films. And I think the first 20 minutes of this movie, we'll say 15 to 20 minutes, is possibly the best 15 to 20 minutes that Pixar has ever offered us, ever. Out of all of these movies, this might be the best first few scenes. But after that, the movie is significantly less interesting for me, and it's just not as good as that first 15, 20 minutes, as the first few scenes of this film. And a lot of the time, you will get that incredible epic third act, and you'll walk out of the movie raving and hyped up. Well, the first few scenes of this film still had people hyped up after the movie was over because it was that good, it was that impactful, it was that sad and emotional. You get to see him live his life with the woman that he loved, and that's great. But then he goes on this adventure, and the adventure is fun, and the movie is still great, and I thoroughly enjoy it. All of the characters, Doug, and the animals, and the beasts, and the scenes, the way they look, the construction, the scenery, the backgrounds, everything is great. But it's just not as great as that first 15 minutes. And because of that, I still think it's a great movie, keeps it from being an awesome movie, and keeps it from being better than some of the other movies on this great tier. So maybe I don't love Up as much as other people, but I still love it. Right, I still love all of these Pixar films. Guys, this has been one of the longest videos I have ever done, but this has been an absolute freaking blast to do, talking about all of these Pixar films. I hope I did it right. Can't see. Getting tired. I'm filming this late at night, so I should probably go to bed soon. But thank you guys so much for watching this video, for getting through this list with me. I truly appreciate it. Some of these movies I haven't watched in a while. I need to go back, need to refresh myself. I may do another one with the next Pixar movie, but as of right now, Toy Story 4 is coming out on Thursday. So you guys tune into that review, and either in that review or in my Toy Story movies ranked video, I will give you an updated tier list position on where Toy Story 4 will rank within all of these particular tiers and where it placed. And be sure to get on that Letterboxd page and check out all of my scores for each individual movie. Thank you guys once again for watching this. I had a great time talking about it, and I will see you very soon, probably later today, with another Netflix review. I'll catch you guys later.